Track 17.
This week's Our World program comes from Canada, where Usha Lee McFarling sends this report on how global warming is affecting the behavior of polar bears and creating problems for the town of Churchill, which depends on the bears for tourism.
The Hudson Bay polar bears are an unusual group. They spend half their year living on the frozen sea ice. And in a normal year, around springtime, when the weather gets warmer, the bears move onto land as the sea ice begins to melt. Once they have done this, their lives enter a new phase, which involves a change in their metabolism. They don't hibernate, but their bodies slow down because they won't eat for the next 6 months. During this half of the year, they lose hundreds of pounds in weight. Each autumn, as the temperature falls, the bears migrate past the small town of Churchill, waiting for the Hudson Bay to freeze over again. When it has, the bears go back onto the sea ice. Now they can build up their fat reserves by feeding on seals. They survive because the surface of the Hudson Bay is normally frozen from mid-October through to mid-April. During these months, the bears sleep on ice floes and swim in the frigid waters. Normally, that means millions of dollars for the town of Churchill, which earns money by taking tourists into the tundra to see the bears as they pass by the town. However, recently the weather has been warmer and the bears' behavior has changed. The warm weather prevents the sea from freezing, and so the hungry bears come into town looking for food.
Track 18.
Having spent 6 months without food, the bears are at their most hungry and dangerous. Starving bears often lose their natural wariness and wander into town. If a town resident spots a bear, they call the Bear Alert Program on 675-BEAR, day or night, to report a bear in town. Officer Richard Romaniuk and his crew will then shoot the bear with a sleeping dart. It will then be taken to polar bear prison. Sometimes the officers capture 4 bears in a day. To keep the animals from associating humans with food, they are not fed in prison. The bears are kept locked up until the sea freezes. Once the sea has frozen again, the bears are airlifted by helicopter and flown back to return to their natural winter habitat. The program has 2 objectives. The first is to protect people from the bears. The second is to protect the bears from the people.
Track 19.
The town of Churchill has good reason to look after the bears. Rough estimates indicate the province of Manitoba earns in the region of $300 million each year from bear tourism. Bears are the backbone of our economy, said town manager Darren Ottaway. While Ottaway is concerned about an abundance of hungry bears coming to town in the short term, he is even more worried that global warming may mean no bears here at all one day. For 3 weeks during bear season, Sleepy Churchill blooms as about 15,000 tourists stream through town, hoping to get close-up views of the animals from caravans of heated tundra buggies. Several chartered jets unload bear gazers at the Churchill airport each day. Hotels and restaurants closed during the bleak winter fill to capacity. Polar bears are not currently an endangered species. Their total population is estimated to be from 22,000 to 27,000. But the 1,200 Hudson Bay bears could face what scientists call a local extinction. They could produce fewer cubs and eventually die out. Officials and business leaders in Churchill have already begun planning for alternative ways of generating income. Ottaway is promoting whale watching and is delighted that Japanese tourists are willing to brave the bone-chilling cold of winter to view the northern lights. It's super news for us, Ottaway said of the potential Japanese tourist boom. Warmer weather, Ottaway said, could also extend the shipping season on Hudson Bay and attract more filmmakers. The science fiction classic Iceman was filmed nearby, as well as an upcoming film, The Snow Walker. When people talk about climate change, you have to look at the benefits too, Ottaway said. Others, however, feel differently. The bears have been in our community for years. said one resident. They're like neighbors, and everybody ought to be helping to make sure their natural life cycle can be maintained.
Track 20. 1,
Area.
2,
Category.
3,
Community.
4,
Economy.
5,
Enormous.
6,
Estimate.
7,
Minor.
8,
Phenomenon.
9,
Potential.
10,
Region.
11,
Resident.
12.
Strategy.
Track 21. 1,
The Hudson Bay polar bears are an unusual group.
2,
Sometimes the officers capture 4 bears in a day.
3,
The town of Churchill has good reason to look after the bears.
4,
Polar bears are not currently an endangered species.
5.
The bears have been in our community for years.
Track 22.
My favorite animal is a camel. It is quite a large animal, and one thing about it that makes it easy to recognize is that it has a hump, either 1 or 2, depending on the type. I think I saw my first camel when I went to visit my uncle. He lives in a town where camel racing is really popular, so you see camels everywhere, sometimes just walking in the streets. I really like camels because, for me, they move so gracefully when they walk, and I've always found it fascinating that they can survive for long periods without water. I feel the camel is an important symbol of my country because I guess many people associate camels with my country. It's also an important animal for food. I mean, we drink camel milk. And, of course, racing camels make lots of money for their owners, so there's an economic aspect as well.
Track 23.
I think there is a dual responsibility for protecting animals. Firstly, it is the responsibility of governments to make sure this happens. There should be laws to ensure, for example, that whales and dolphins are protected. I remember reading somewhere that quite a few dolphins get killed because they get caught in fishing nets. Of course, we, the general public, also have an important part to play in this. As far as dolphins are concerned, we can make sure we only buy tinned fish, that is, dolphin-friendly, and what I mean by this is that the correct fishing methods have been used. I feel quite strongly that animals like dolphins must be protected because if we don't do this, dolphins could be in danger of becoming extinct, and that would be a real shame. There would be other effects too, like to the tourist industry. I mean, if you think about it, in many countries like New Zealand and Australia, tourists pay to go and look at the dolphins and even swim with them, which must be quite an unforgettable experience.
Track 24.
Good morning and welcome to this series of lectures on man interfering with nature. This morning we are going to look at the issue of cloning. I'd like to begin by looking at some examples of animals that have been cloned before moving on to looking at how cloning is defined. The first example I'd like to talk about is Idaho Gem, who was the very first mule to be cloned. Mules are a combination of horse and donkey. Idaho Gem is an identical copy of his brother Taz, who is a racing champion. Thus, we can make the conclusion here that he was cloned to follow in his brother's footsteps. The next example I'd like to refer to is Cece, which stands for copycat. Like her name suggests, she was the first cloned kitten. Interestingly, Cece was created in a laboratory in the state of Texas by the very same scientists who made Dolly the sheep in Scotland. Cece is physically identical to her mother Rainbow, and what is important about this is that it has opened the doors for people to clone their pets in the future. Now, the last animal example I'd like to look at today is the pig. In 2001, 5 piglets were born, all female. They were created by a firm who claimed that their birth is an important step for medicine. The idea is that pig organs and cells could be used in human transplants because the pigs have been cloned without a certain cell. This cell is a vital link because it is the one in human beings that is responsible for making the body reject donor organs. This means that not only is the transplant operation unsuccessful, but the patient's life could be at risk. Now, I'd like to discuss some of the current definitions of cloning.
Track 25.
One kind of cloning, the kind commonly found in plants, occurs when plants reproduce themselves around the original plants, known as the parent plants. New plants can then grow. This is quite a natural process by which plants can form more of the same type of plant. Though you may not be aware of it, another type of cloning happens quite naturally in your body when old cells need to be replaced. Cells in your body split into 2 and make new chromosomes, and it is the chromosomes that contain our genes. Embryo splitting is another form of cloning, which can happen quite naturally when cells split to form 2 identical twins. You may then be asking yourself what all the fuss is about. If cloning does in fact happen naturally, because sometimes man can interfere with nature and it can work. Take embryo splitting as an example. Now, this type of cloning is quite common in farming, and it is used to breed new bulls and cows. Embryos are placed into foster mother cows, and these then grow into calves. And though some may consider this to be artificial, it has been going on for the last 10 years with relatively few problems. Now, the last type of cloning I'd like to mention is perhaps the most controversial. This type of cloning is called nuclear transfer, and it is when the nucleus of a cell is put into an egg of another animal that is genetically the same. This is done in a laboratory. And after about 5 or 6 days, the embryo is implanted into a donor mother, which is how Dolly the sheep was made. One argument in favor of cloning is that it can help in medicine, as in the case of pigs being used in transplant operations. It is true that many people can wait for up to a year for a new kidney, and then still run the risk of their bodies rejecting the donor kidney. But will using pig organs really be the solution? To answer this question, I'd like to take a look at some responses to the whole idea of using pig organs in humans. Neil Blackwood, who works for the company that cloned the 5 piglets, described it as a major medical advance that could solve the global problem of a lack of organs to use in transplant operations. This could lead in the future to saving human lives. Sheila Halliday, a leading transplant surgeon, does not share his view. She believes that although it is possible to use pig organs in humans, there are very real dangers. Halliday points out that diseases and infections could be passed from pig to human. Of course, she does not yet know this for certain, which is why Halliday strongly advocates that more scientific research be done. She firmly believes pig organs should not be used in human operations until these findings are made public.